Well, Fukushima, it happened in 10 years ago this week. They had an enormous earthquake, one of the worst earthquakes they've ever had, if not the worst earthquake. And that led to a follow-on a tsunami. And the and that hit the plant, the Fukushima Daiichi plant in Japan. And they shut down when they detected the earthquake, and that was all fine. And so they'd gone into a state where they were being cooled to get rid of the decay heat. But 45 minutes after they had shut down, they were hit by this enormous tidal wave. What it did is it knocked out the cooling systems, knocked out the cooling pumps, knocked out the cooling systems you need on a reactor. The reactors overheated. They melted, the fuel melted, it was contained within the plant, but there were gases that escaped and particulate that escaped, some particulate escaped, in fact, there were actually hydrogen explosions, not nuclear explosions, but hydrogen explosions, which vented this to the outside world. About 110,000 people were told that they needed to evacuate, and which they did, and they were joined by about 45 to 50,000 of people who were living nearby who hadn't been told to evacuate, but decided to do so anyway. So it was around about 160,000 in total of people evacuated. And so we examined that. I led it was actually a multi-university study. At my own university, I used the J-value method to look at it. Other universities, Manchester used optimal economic control to look at the problem, and the Open University looked at another method. They had a collaboration with Public Health England, and they looked at their codes. And the extraordinary thing is, and we were looking at this in 2012, a year after Fukushima, the extraordinary thing is that all these things were coming to the same conclusion, which surprised us, which was that it was not a good idea to evacuate people from after a big nuclear, the worst nuclear disaster at Chernobyl. The evacuation was exaggerated. About 5 or 10 times too many people moved out. After Fukushima, no one should have been moved, not 100,000, not 160,000. No one needed to move out of their homes. The first thing that I think our study actually showed was that people should be aware. You should be biased against moving people out. In almost no severe nuclear accidents should you be moving people out. Certainly not many people.
So, just to take a step back and look at the bigger perspective, what was the harm that resulted from this accident and from the evacuation? Can you summarize, how many people died, how many people got cancer, what happened, and what was the result of those actions?
Well, no one died as a result of radiation exposure. The harm that was done was actually the best estimate we have of the harm that was done was about 2,000 people who were in old people's homes, and older people were moved out, and about over 2,000 of those died prematurely, earlier than you would have expected that a similar cohort to die within the next 3 years. And we've looked at the life expectancy that was lost, and so on. So the net effect of the evacuation, not of the accident, but of the evacuation, was to cause some premature deaths. We found that if the people had stayed in the worst affected town, which was Tomioka, there were 16,000 people there. They were all moved out. If they had stayed there, then they could expect to have lost over the next till to the end of their lives, basically over the next 70 years, we were looking at that sort of time period, around about 2 to 3 months of life expectancy, which is rather small. I spent 15 years in London. London at the moment, the average Londoner is losing 4.5 months life expectancy to air pollution, and yet no one is asking for London, all the inhabitants of London, to be evacuated.
The Rational View is a weekly series hosted by me, Dr. Alan Scott, providing a rational, evidence-based perspective on important societal issues.